Hi, I'm Chelsey,
And I'm Sophie.
and today we'll be doing our presentation on arts, theater, entertainment in the Elizabethan culture and era.
What even is the Elizabethan era?
Well, the Elizabethan era is when Queen Elizabeth had her reign ruling Ireland and England. And a theater at the time were also called the Elizabethan Renaissance, that refers to the sort of plays that blossomed in that particular era.
During that time period, all sorts of art were really important.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, there was poetry, painting, theater, music, dance, and there even had some type of art called masks.
Oh, really? What are masks?
It's a form of entertainment where people dressed up in masks like these.
Why would they dress like that?
They would dress up as mythological figures.
Then what?
Then they would recite poetry, sing, and dance.
Interesting. I've never heard about that.
In that era, there were also some very, very weird forms of entertainment.
Oh yeah? Like what?
Well, there's bear baiting, court jesters, and firework display.
Oh, I've heard about bear baiting. Didn't they tie bears to a post and set dogs loose to attack them?
Yeah, it's awful.
Court jesters are basically clowns in Elizabethan era, right?
Yeah, kinda. Their purpose was to entertain a large group of people, including the royal family. Queen Elizabeth especially liked theater. Hey Chelsey, do you know the history behind theater?
Why, yes, I do.
Tell me more about it.
The first professional troupes of actors were sponsored by the Queen, nobles, and anyone else who had the money for such entertainments. And those spectacles were frequently held at her royal residences. In fact, the Elizabethan theater witnessed the first professional actors who belonged to touring groups, and who performed plays of blank verse with entertaining, non-religious themes. Since the popularity of the theater were growing every single day, the investments were growing as well. More time and money were wooing their audience of both sexes and also social class. Unfortunately, Elizabeth banned religious plays because there was a danger that England would fall into a war of religion.
Were they at least allowed to talk about religious plays?
Again, no, talk about religious plays were not allowed because of the fear of rumors of the war spreading.
Were women allowed to be actors at that time?
Unfortunately, no. Women were allowed to be actors until the 17th century in the Common Era. When was the first purpose theater built?
The first purpose-built permanent theater was established in London in 1576.
What was it called?
The playhouse was built by James Burbage. He called it the theater.
Why did he call it that?
He got the idea from a Roman playhouse. It became hugely popular with the first London playgoers.
What did the playhouse look like?
The theater was a wooden enclosed building with no roof in the center, and it welcomed audiences of both courtiers and commoners. Hey Chelsey, want to hear a fun fact about Burbage?
Sure, what is it?
At that time, he was also an actor.
Really? That's really cool.
Hey Chelsey, you know a lot about popular theaters. Can you name me another one?
Sure. How about the Globe Theater? It opened business in 1599 and was owned by Burbage's sons and some members of the professional acting company known as Chamberlain's Men. Hey Sophie, did you know that one of their investors was actually a famous playwright? Do you know who it is?
Shakespeare?
Yes, actually.
Well, what did his theater look like?
Well, the Globe Theater was made out of wood, more or less circular form, and open to the skies in the center. The theater got its name from the globe on the roof, which carried the legend of of Shakespeare's famous line, "All the words, a stage." The globe-owned stage was rectangular. Behind the stage was a gallery which could seat more viewers or be used as an important part of the play. Hey Sophie, you want to talk about the different social classes while attending a play?
Yeah, sure. The general public, or people who were not royals or nobles, were called groundlings. They would only pay 1 penny to stand in the pit of the Globe Theater.
Spectators, depending on how much money they had, could either stand in the yard, which may have sloped towards the stage, sit on benches in the gallery that went around the greater parts of the walls, sit in one of the private boxes, or sit on a stool on the stage proper.
Rich nobles could watch the play from a chair set on the side of the Globe stage itself, So, an audience viewing a play may often have to ignore the fact that there's a nobleman sitting right on the stage.
Hey Sophie, did you know men and women could attend the theater, but the women's were supposed to be wearing masks because the women who attended this art were looked down upon and considered prostitutes because the theater is usually where you'd find them and their clients. And people also thought that the women should be at home with the kids and maybe not attend the theater because they would be considered rogues and vagabonds, especially the men.
Oh wow, that's very harsh. Hey Chelsey, I got another fun fact for you.
Oh really? What is it?
Did you know that the plays were always held in the daylight since there was no electricity at that time?
Oh wow, that must be why the costumes were so vibrant.
Yeah, that's exactly why.
Didn't the costumes most likely outweigh the performers?
Yeah, that's true. Every color of clothing had its own meaning and conveyed an enormous amount of information during the Elizabethan era, and the meaning was really understood by the audience.
Weren't the character costumes for women very elaborate?
Yes, they were very elaborate and constructed of many layers. It consisted of a single chemise, a corset to make their waist look smaller, stocking pantalettes, an underskirt, and a stomacher.
Well, what about the makeup? I doubt there was a Sephora at that time anyway.
Well, since the women couldn't play in theater at that time, they tried to make the men look as feminine as possible.
And how would they do that?
Well, they wore wigs, and at that time it was popular for women to have very light faces and bright red cheeks.
Well, what kind of products did they use?
The makeup the men would use for performing was made out of kohl, ceruse for the face, and vermilion for bright red cheeks.
Oh, that's very different from today.
Since they had very different resources than what we have today, what did they use for props?
Well, the more commonly used props were swords, daggers, pistols, rope, and chairs. Hey Sophie, do you think we should tell them about the great playwrights and great actors at the time?
Yeah, sure. So first off, there was Ben Jonson. He was a playwright of the period of 1572 to 1637. He was a bricklayer, but escaped that life to become a playwright. His first play was Isle of Dogs.
The next one is Richard Tarleton, who was also a court jester who made Elizabeth's favorite list that made her laugh until his jokes went too far and ridiculed some of her noble favorites.
The next playwright is Marlowe.
Well, who is Marlowe?
Well, his name is Christopher Marlowe. He was the next most celebrated playwright after Shakespeare. But Chelsey, didn't he die in some really weird way?
Well, his first play was performed, Turbulent the Great. The play was a smash hit. Other successes followed, such as The Tragedy of Dido, Queen of Carthage, but like many playwrights and poets of the period, Marlowe was prone to drinking bouts, and it was a brawl in a tavern that ended in his death. But evidently it's all rumors, since there's not actual proof that he died that way.
I heard the crowd had a lot of fan favorites. What were they?
Well, the crowd's favorite genres were comedies, romances, histories, and especially tragedies. Hey, weren't some of the most famous tragedies at that time were written by Shakespeare?
The first one is Romeo and Juliet, a love tragedy by Shakespeare. The next one is Julius Caesar, a tragedy played in 1599 about war. Macbeth, Shakespeare's shortest tragedy. He was told not to use real incantations in fear that if it played in theater it would be cursed. Othello, another tragedy by William Shakespeare.
And you can't forget about King Lear and Hamlet. King Lear was a tragedy by William Shakespeare based off the mythological Lear of Britain. And Hamlet was actually the longest play by Shakespeare, with 29,551 words.
Wow, I never knew there was so much history in the theater, especially so many different types of entertainment.
Thanks guys for watching the video.